Hello, everyone out there on LinkedIn, YouTube, X, Facebook, wherever you happen to be inhabiting space at the moment. Good now to you and wherever and whenever you are. My name's Ryan Erickson. I'm an associate with Red 42 consulting firm based out of Wiesbaden, Germany. And I am here today with my friend and companion, Niels Pflaeging, and we are going to talk today about the newest white paper coming out of the BetaCodex network, the 20th in a series of white papers. And Niels, if you want to provide a little welcome, first of all.
Hello, Ryan. This is our
Say,
27th episode, by the way.
Yeah, 27. My gosh.
It's always unscripted and full of surprises for us as well. So
yes, be prepared to be surprised in open space. So with that, welcome, and as always. So, how would you like to prepare the folks out there for what we're about to talk about today? What are these research papers and why are they important?
yes. I mean, this one is called Cell Structure Design Patterns number 2, which suggests that it's part of a series, the second part of a series. And it's the 20th BetaCodex research paper overall. And I recently looked at when did we start writing them, really, or publishing them, and how many did we publish at the beginning and now? And so for everybody looking at the website, will see that in the first year, 2008, first year of the foundation of the network, we published 9 of those white papers. And I was quite astonished myself. After 15 years, you do not remember all the details. And And what is the reason? Why did we publish so many of those papers back then? There was a simple reason, really. There weren't any. We hadn't published any books in English back then. So there was nothing apart from the papers. There was not so much content for the BetaCodex network or from the BetaCodex network to consult upon or to read. So early on, the idea was let's first put out some of these papers, stuff that we already understood, but that hadn't been articulated in this way. So in the first year, I wrote, together with others, we wrote 9 papers. And the first one, there were 2 papers already on cell structure design back then, but the paper was called Turn Your Company Outside In. So this is something like the 6th paper on cell structure design that we published now. And of course, it should be mentioned as well that why research papers and not white papers anymore, because the idea is and has always been to make the whole network thingy be research based. BetaCodex network is strictly non-commercial. It doesn't have any commercial activities or income or anything like that. So the idea is to keep it strictly non-commercial. And why? Because it's all about sharing, about being open source, about making the world a better place and not doing business. So it's not like Scrum.org or other.
Or any of the certification mills that are out there,
Exactly. That is, by the way, why there are no certifications right now. The network will not do it, and all others, like Red 42, we are not offering certifications massively because we think it's flawed, and others do not seem to dig it either. That's reasonable, I think, in the context of the BetaCodex. So it's research-based. The network is research-based. We have to keep the research going. And one thing I learned again and again writing this 20th paper, for me it's the 19th paper. One paper, number 7, I think, was by another author, Gerhard Wohland. Others were written in collaboration with other authors, in this case with Silke, of course. And one thing I noticed again when thinking about the session today was, it's easiest to do this kind of research and to document the learnings and the insight that we gathered during the work. And in this case, much of this, what is written in this paper, I was reminded of it. I kept refreshing it. I keep refreshing these things during every project about cell structure design, but much of the learning that's documented in this paper occurred or was refreshed or updated or specified during my work with a client in Switzerland last year. So this is very great. So the first notes, I made them in September or October or something. And No, I just wrote it up and yeah.
And looking at the last 3 papers have really been the last 2, this one and 19, were focused certainly very deeply on cell structure design. But again, looking if you out there, we'll put a link in there. Always go to betacodex.org to get the links to the research paper. You'll find all 20 in multiple languages.
All free of charge, or all free of registration as well. So anybody can download them at any time, share them as you like. And so,
yes, all BetaCodex network is all in on the Creative Commons shared attribution licensing. But yeah, so 18, 19, and 20 all have cell structures. They're referenced in the back of the existing of paper 20. So
yes,
if we get time, we'll go to that.
Yes. Yes, the number 17 was about the invention of managements. Yes, another Mary Parker Follett, the first Mary Parker Follett related paper. The second Mary Parker Follett related paper was about Follett and org physics.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, I think the paper number 19 was inspired as well by this fact that we, Silke and I came up with this idea of sharing our ongoing insights from our consulting projects as research. So we have a project about that for OpenSpace Beta, which we are working on. It's called the OpenSpace Beta Commentary, and it's being worked upon. That will likely take another form first, and not the form of white papers, but the form of a book, probably.
Yes.
And then there might be papers as well. But in this case, I thought, okay, let's make it simple and easy and start with 10 patterns. That was the last paper published in July last year. And then I kept thinking, okay, there are more interesting patterns that should be shared and that are less obvious as well. So I think it's fair to say that the patterns described in this newest white paper are less obviously related to cell structure design. They are a little bit witty patterns.
Oh yes, absolutely. Would you like to get in depth with the pattern?
Yes.
Let's go for it.
There are 10 thank you for proofreading it, Ryan. You also. I mean, I kind of wrote the first draft myself, then Silke revised and edited, and we changed a couple of things, and we did the proofreading. Thank you, which was timely and of course it made the paper much better. I always notice this. No, it's much better than before.
Well, we all do these. Yeah. We are better together, and I think for me, individually, personally, doing the proofreading and the editing. There's no better way to really learn, for me individually, about the concepts. We did it with the 12 laws. I've done it with some other kinds of things, and that's not an exclusive domain to me. It is anyone who wants to help, right? Who is capable of helping and wants to learn. That could potentially be an option. But again, and
well put.
Yes. And thank you for the acknowledgement. I appreciate it. Well, we can go right into which of the patterns that you discovered that you articulated here, which one was the most surprising to you?
I think I cannot answer that. Again, there are 10 patterns described in this white paper. They are very varied. For example, the first one is about the importance of devolving invoicing to cells in the periphery, which may sound like a feeble pattern in a way. It's very small or simple or obvious pattern. At least to me, it's sometimes think it's very obvious, but it isn't. Of course, it's not obvious at all, because in organizational realities, that kind of stuff doesn't exist. And cells in the periphery do not exist. There are departments and silos and so on, and individual targets and all this kind of.
And the invoicing process is this huge monolithic process, that's happened by the accounts payable folks,
for example, by supposed specialists. And often
so,
it's so badly organized that the quality of the invoicing is bad. It's untimely, and this is one of the reasons why I came up with 3 first patterns in this paper, because at these last clients I had, I will not divulge which ones but it's not. It doesn't have to be a secret, because they improved so much. So I think pretty much in every transformation case that we touched on, and in which services were part of the product, the invoicing situation was miserable. So the quality of the invoices, the timeliness, there were delays in invoicing. So you did the service and then you would invoice some of the hours or the time or the services only 2 or 3 months later, which is the ultimate luxury. I always tell my clients, this is the ultimate luxury. You do the work and fuck the invoicing. We don't.
Yeah, it's someone else's. Getting the revenue is someone else's problem. Right?
Exactly. And the follow up to, of course, the how is it called in English? I forgot the word. When the client doesn't pay immediately, the follow up with
delinquency.
Yeah, not that. Before that, you do some reminding of you can remind your clients that there was invoicing and that they didn't pay within the predetermined term of whatever 14 days.
Yeah.
So, how is it called? Clients pay accounts payable work.
Yeah.
Oh, accounts receivable, really. So.
Oh yeah.
So you remind your clients who haven't paid that they should now. Yeah. So and then you have all kinds of problems around invoicing and following up on clients' payments, and of course, and this is the focus of the first pattern, which again may seem banal, but in a service company, especially, or in companies in which services matter, the act of invoicing is a source of pride. That's the name of this pattern as well. It's like for the father bringing in the
hunter bringing in the kill, right?
The hunter bringing in the kill. Yes, exactly. So it's fundamentally related to the purposefulness thing of the work, the feeling of being connected with the work and the client, of course, because there's this beautiful ritual that Alan Weiss always talks about when he invoices something. He at least wrote this 20 years ago. So when he writes an invoice that is above a certain value, maybe $25,000 or so, he has this ritual of putting on a cigar. Because it's a source of pride.
Yeah.
To invoice a client, because that's the value you create. And so this pattern, is it surprising to me? No. Maybe the most surprising to me, the most recent learning for me would be
maybe I could kind of go through the 10 patterns and just kind of give the wash, or if you want to say another surprising pattern that comes to you, that's great too.
I actually wanted to say the first one, I wouldn't say it came surprising to me at all at any point, but it's highly significant. It's very much about this idea of cell structure design, of giving teams in the periphery, putting them in charge. And that means let them do the fucking invoicing. Of course, sometimes you have to simplify the process of invoicing for that. And the other two patterns there relate to that a little bit. The second, third pattern. We don't want to tell everybody everything in this session, right? We want them to read the paper.
Well, sure. The other piece that you kind of mentioned it right there is one of the things I wrote down about the notes of it, that the idea of autonomy we're talking about autonomous cells, freedom and responsibility combined. And that's the idea that we're responsible for invoicing. We're taking, you're free now, but that means you as a cell, you have a profit and loss statement. You have responsibility for invoicing your own and receivables and the relationship and all of that kind of stuff. It's not just anarchy that we kind of say, or laissez-faire behavior, but
freedom comes with responsibility. Otherwise, it's not autonomy; it's anarchy or laissez-faire, as you so well put. Yeah, exactly.
So you're going to say
to run your business as you see fit means that you should be responsible for the whole client relationship with it, which includes invoicing. Which doesn't mean, of course, that somebody from accounts receivables or cannot support the process in some way. But for example, at one of those last clients they had a whole process of a deadline where the accounting departments had to receive the invoicing data before the end of the month, I suppose. And then after a few days, they had to give it back. So they had a few days to process the invoice, and then it had to be checked again. So all this checking, drafting, all this error. It was the process was prone with error and very time consuming, very energy consuming, and you couldn't do the work. in a sense. Yeah. So one of the first things I thought is, okay, here's a serious opportunity for process improvement. Yeah. And what is the key idea? Devolve the responsibility period.
Yeah.
Very simple. It works every time.
Well, it's the larger theme. So, and that you did mention that the first three patterns were interlocked and interrelated. The
Yes.
themes, that invoicing being a source of pride,
Yes.
and stop
And then the use of
monitoring
time.
people. Stop monitoring people's time,
Yes.
which is a huge shift for folks.
Huge topic in most organizations we work with. Yes.
And then if you're not monitoring people's time, what's naturally there is the value-based pricing. So value-based pricing, the end of time reporting, time monitoring, and then peripheral responsibility for employees.
Yes, and one of the reasons why I thought value-based pricing should appear in this paper is that in one of our books, Complexity Tools, it's not yet out in English, but in German it has been. It was a bestseller 9 or 10 years ago already. We already had put a chapter a little. We call it a complexity. Value-based pricing. It's a concept that we got from Alan Weiss, and we always thought it's an important complexity tool in a way, an important characteristic of a beta organization, to not do time-based pricing but value-based pricing. If you have a service business, at least partially. So in English, we never published anything about that, at least not that I know. So I thought that it was more than time, long overdue, to mention this properly. And of course, it comes up in pretty much all our consulting projects.
Yeah. Well, of course.
Sometimes usually my clients at first tell me it's not possible. We cannot do it. Our clients want us to invoice by time, hour, or day. We are used to very specifically document. We are proud of documenting our time. I've heard this so many times. But usually my clients, during the process of transformation, which takes maybe 2 or 3 months with self-structure design, 3 months, 90 days with open space, people learn that this is a key tool. Not do the change in the 90 days. It's an important topic, so it had to be in this paper, I thought.
Yeah. Well, also you realize if you get rid of time reporting, you also get rid of the invoice reconciliation processing, the disputes over how did you actually spend 12 and a half hours here, or was it 12? Yes. Or all these discussion of details that don't really matter, that again, you can call them a power game, or there's an incentive to be untruthful with your hours. Always.
Yes, well put.
Yeah, and then if you do the hygiene right, you target that process as an element of the organizational hygiene. Oh, now that we're not worrying about that, we have an increased level of trust in the organization and in the client relationship. That
yes, and one of the facets is, I think, to stop recording all the time elements. That's the worst outcome that you can have. To record not just client time, that billable hours, so to say, so to speak, but also once you start allocating hours internally, and then you match that with the total hours due by the employee, then you are in times.
You did. Well, you only spent 55 hours on this project, and you were supposed to be allocated to that particular project for 120 hours. And where's the delta? And all those conversations that have little to do with the value delivered, and everything to do with an individual exerting control over another individual.
Yes. Our departments exerting control in areas and silos, exerting control. So it's a real power play. So usually one part of adopting a self-structure design is to abolish the internal time recording fully, and then to move away from the external time recording as much as possible. This is outlined in the paper. Of course, there are compliance matters. Sometimes in some countries more, in some countries less. Yeah. I keep educating my clients that the time due by employees is already defined in the work contract, or in the time even by the type of work contract. So you do not have to specify the time that is due, the time, the work hours that we as an employee owes to the company. But then there's all this kind of control. For example, in Germany, legally you have to document the actual hours, but that should be a full amount of per day maximum. And then the question is how to record it. What is the degree of recording? How do you record it, and do you control it? And you shouldn't control it, of course. That's like it goes back to Deming. If you have a product, if you produce a product and you have to do quality control on 100% of your finished product, then you are in hell. You should move to occasionally, how is it called?
Periodically, kind of.
Periodically or coincidental control.
Exception based.
And not, now I approve your hours if they are correct. And that most companies have that. And they even do hour or time forecasting. One of my clients recently had all kinds of time forecasting. So they had kind of like production planning in a factory, work hour planning for all the employees, extremely time consuming process, especially for managers, right? So all this usually you reduce it by 95% usually by restricting it to what's needed for compliance and what you need for invoicing. And if you move to value-based pricing, you get rid of even the client-based. For example, when I do consulting, I never record my hours. Why would I? I charge by value, and I've done so for 20 years. So, and I'm not very smart in that regard. It's just the right thing to do.
Yeah, not being clever about it. I think
exactly.
in the IT world, and again in IT in general, there's a whole industry around staff augmentation and hours and billing yourself by hours and what is your hourly rate and all this stuff. If you're and you're on contract and of course there's it's prevalent. And I think one thing that just came to mind when talking about this, which is not really related. Well, I guess it kind of is related to cell structure design. If a cell decides to employ a contingent worker, for example, someone on contract, and what are the ways to we don't do time reporting. Well, how am I going to get paid? Well, okay, consultant. This is part of, if you're going to work with this organization, then this is my assumption here, and that thinking if I were in a cell and wanted to engage a contingent worker, that we are going to we're going to assign a value-based contract with you or with your firm.
Sure.
That takes some,
which can be a monthly subscription, for example, a monthly subscription fee. And if you use us only 3 minutes, if you use only 3 minutes of our time, it's still as valuable as if we work an entire week on it. It's the value that the client wants, not the time. So
it's like keeping a retainer. Keeping a retainer.
A retainer is one form of value-based pricing. Another is a project price. For example, when we sell a transformation, it has a basically one price, and by the way, we always in my line of our line of work, we explain to our client, you do not pay for our time. You also pay for us being available during the 90 days, not just during the 90 days of open space, but during the whole 150 days actually. So you pay us for our mastery, for our ability, for the value that the thing creates, the transformation creates, but you pay us for our availability, so that you can call us anytime, that we will be there if there's trouble. We will be there the next day at the client side, and we stay as long as needed. Of course, there are exceptions. It's not always possible to respond immediately to the client demand, but usually yes.
But you remove that friction from the relationship, as opposed to oh my gosh, if I call here, I'm gonna incur a change request on this project that's gonna cost me another $10,000, $20,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why people hate lawyers, right? Because if you have just a conversation usually with a lawyer, you already charge for even if it takes 2 minutes, it might be $400, $500 or so in the US, but it's a top person. And that's not very. We have another service provider, for example, who charges some maintenance rate, and it's fantastic. And we know that if we are in trouble with something, then he will solve those problems, regardless how long it takes. It's his problem.
It's a shared accountability.
Yeah.
So many. I guess we could. I'm sure we had. This actually was a topic. Thinking about we were going to do a whole session at one point about compensation and money matters and things like that. That's one that's on here. A couple there. Then there's the issue of ownership and profit sharing. Those were two of the patterns that came up here. The other one that I was really interested about, and that I often get asked about when we're talking about this. Well, if cells in the periphery all have profit and loss statements, right? Well, and we used to coordinate across functional divisions and towers. Well, how do we manage that? And how, as an organization, how do we manage that? And well, the way I would explain it is you have agreements between the cells as to, what are the boundaries here, what are the boundaries there, and we have these collegial agreements, and you articulate that here in the paper.
What is a question that you get asked? How to manage what?
Well, how do you do coordination if you don't have a large group of individuals, like in a functional tower, right? A tower silo. That have large scale service agreements that you would do
with a client
internally. We're talking about internal, internally within the company. Well, how do we manage the coordinate if everyone's autonomous, if everyone has their own profit and loss statement? Well, what happens when we need to collaborate across?
Did you get this asked yesterday during the?
No, I didn't get this asked. This was just something that
because it's a wrong question, right? There's no right answer to it. It's just that people explain how in command and control things work, and then they wonder how it can work without the bullshit, the service level agreements and the budgets and the allocations.
Well, how would it work? How would it work naturally? Well, you make agreements, and that I think this is the whole scratch my back, I'll scratch yours principle that you came up. That you named.
Exactly. It's let's clarify this for a moment. So how do you? By the way, you use a magic word, right? When you talked about the question that you get asked from time to time. How do we coordinate? And the answer is you don't. You don't, but cells do. Cells coordinate. You do not coordinate, because coordinating by managers or centralized functions or disposition people or staff coordinators, staff planning, timing, scheduling. There are so many words for this. Dysfunctions, really. They are not functions, they are dysfunctions, right? Alpha dysfunctions.
Well, that brings to mind this kind of external orchestration, kind of between an external party coordinating that, as opposed to a peer,
right?
As opposed to a peer agreement. This is a partnership. This is a difference between this partnership and
exactly. This is the pattern number 4 in this new white paper. Is called "Scratch My Back and I'll Scratch Yours." Do you know why I put this name there? "Scratch My Back and I'll Scratch Yours."
Possibly because of the Peter Gabriel albums is my bet.
This is a nod to Peter Gabriel. Yes, he made 2 albums, "Scratch My Back and I'll Scratch Yours." He recording the songs of others, and then other people recording his songs, I think.
Yes.
So that's the name. But and this is something that flabbergasts all my clients. When we talk about the periphery and cells become autonomous, they say, but you cannot run this and that project or that client service with just 7 people or 8 people. It's impossible. Today we have 50 people on that client. And so then, of course, usually that's totally overblown. It's not true that on a continuous basis so many people work on the same project or client also. But that's another matter. That will come in another paper, I think. That large projects do not exist. Oh, that's a good pattern for the next paper, by the way. We should record that.
Projects that have the same address, right? Is that
exactly? Which is something that I always have to talk for hours with my client. Not for hours, but half an hour in every first client workshop is about this. Large projects, large clients do not exist. There are only small clients, small projects, many of them with the same address. But usually managers are not aware of these things. They have key accountants and all other crap that obfuscates this reality. But here's the thing: when you create a cell structure, let's say your company has 200 people. So we already know right from the start that there will be 25 to 30 cells, and you might have 20, let's say 18, 20 periphery cells in that structure. So you're going, okay, so such small teams, they cannot do the work alone. It doesn't work. You have to have larger teams. They must have 20, 30 people. And then this is the key insight. No, cells can collaborate, but you cannot force them. So of course, cells can make agreements among them, and that's the pattern number 4. It had to be. I think we never probably described it in any paper and so on. So this is new in the way I articulate. By the way, all the texts for this white paper were written from scratch. There's nothing that was copied from the book, the cell structure design book that will be out in a few months. So all these patterns and the texts are fresh. Yeah. But this is an interesting one. Yeah, cells can collaborate. They can, if they need 20 people on the job, they might form 4 cells, 5 cells, 6 cells might share a contract, agreement about it, how to share. So.
It's federalization, right?
Yes. And that flabbergasts most command and control thinkers, most people who are used to alpha organization and to centralized steering and control. Of course, it's a strange thing to grasp. Coordination that's done in the periphery, decentralized.
Yeah, with no coordinator. This is interesting, and this brings me to a side example of the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, which is the only conductorless orchestra in the world currently. And then you think, my gosh, how can you perform a piece of music without a piece of symphonic music without a conductor? Well, there's the whole book, a wonderful book, and I really enjoyed bringing that into the list of beta books, called Leadership Ensemble, that talks about how individual members of the orchestra take responsibility for being a music director in a certain piece, and that they work with the other sections of the orchestra to craft a performance that could have been better than anything that would have been coordinated by an individual music director at the other level. So keep that for another day. But this idea of federated, invited agreements that are that cells take responsibility for. I think that's another
where companies coordinate freely. I just read an article yesterday about a large Dutch company, ADML or something like that. Not sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I shared this with you, and they. I mean, I only read that one article in The Economist about this company. It was published yesterday, I think. And the article is also one of the beautiful elements of the article is that they describe how intensely this company collaborates with other companies that are highly specialized, like Zeiss in optics and so on. The German several German companies are mentioned. So they really form a network and they do research and development together. And one of the things that The Economist cites is a person from Zeiss, I think, saying, yeah, when we have meetings there with them, we cannot know who is from what company. It doesn't really matter. They really work together, right? And this kind of spirit will pervade any cell structure design organization, because the cells will have to work with others. It's natural usually that they will collaborate. Sometimes, for example, a cell will acquire a project and only have maybe one person available to work on it, and then they will collaborate with another cell to execute on the job and so on. All these agreements can be done. People can be, of course, loaned to another, transferred to another cell for a certain time and so on.
Well, there's two pieces that come in there. There's one when you're going across boundaries. This is the other thing I want to talk about. I call it boundary violation and enforcement. I wrote that down when you're talking about
That doesn't sound nice.
No, it doesn't sound. It's yeah, whatever. It's like the Scrum police. Who's gonna be the law enforcement of the Scrum laws? But the two things that came up. One was that I wanted to talk about how the cell boundaries are defined and how that pattern came up for you when you say overstepping of boundaries during the cell constitution must trigger a swift response.
Oh yes, and those boundaries are boundaries of ethical behavior fundamentally. Yeah, not some cell boundaries also, but I in the paper I give some examples, or we give some examples of what overstepping of boundaries might mean. Foolish or evil stuff, I would call it. And of course, if you once you create, and this is I think what mainly why we included this pattern. When you create a cell structure design or cell structure in an organization and you unleash autonomy, it's natural that some teams will struggle to understand the message. What is their responsibility? What is their level of freedom? So they will overstep boundaries. It's natural. And the smarter members of the organization or the smarter teams will, before overstepping a boundary, they will consult others. Say, well, can I do this really in this new structure that we just adopted? It just went live, or it's going live tomorrow. Can we then do this and that? Because now we have a P&L, we have autonomy. Can we buy an iPad for
iPads for everybody? Yeah.
Which happened in one of our client assignments. iPads for everybody. And so if you would consult, maybe some outsider who's not member of the cell would say, do you really need those iPads? Which is the voice of reason, right? That's why consultation is so important. And sometimes people get, as we say in Portuguese, they travel in the mayonnaise. They start traveling in the mayonnaise. They start sliding in their own fantasies and
sliding in the mayonnaise sounds a lot better than sniffing your own farts, which I think is
no. That's not the same. No. Traveling in the mayonnaise. That's the
traveling in the mayonnaise.
Traveling. Yeah. So you kind of you go a little bit crazy. Yeah. And so it's and that means that kind of overstepping of reason, overstepping of ethical boundaries. And so when that happens, there needs to be swift response. Period. Yeah. And the paper describes what is meant by this patterns, why it sometimes occurs, and what is a swift response. We put that a little bit there as well.
It's power. You mentioned power plays, right? When people,
yes,
if there's an existing rivalrous, an unhealthy rivalry between individuals or departments, product and engineering is a typical example of that.
Usually that because when this kind of overstepping of boundaries happened, it means that there was no consultation with other people before. So what happened? What were the internal dynamics that allowed this overstepping of boundaries to happen? And usually, what's behind it is a kind of social dynamic that is unhealthy or power play. I would call it political stuff, or maybe it might be something bad, really. But usually it's just a lack of insight, a lack of reflection. Yeah, and so there must be swift response, clear response, and this overstepping of boundaries might turn into a good story, a good narrative later. Remember when we created the cell structure, everybody in that team bought their own iPads. Remember how foolish we were.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Well, so it's interesting you say that this is something that came up in the Business Agility Berlin meetup that I did yesterday, and I was talking about the overall work the system topics of the BetaCodex in general. Was how does the BetaCodex and the laws of the BetaCodex, how do they relate to organizational culture? Right.
Yes.
And
the answer is?
Well, the answer to me is that, it's all about culture, because it's all about the system that is in place and how things are done, how we are. And again, this is a term that you introduced me to, that culture is the shadow of the system.
Yes.
Right. And that actually was kind of when people say the culture is the way we do things around here.
Yeah, that's nonsense.
What is?
That's
Well,
the
no,
dangerous.
but I think that's kind of the same, because if you think about if we are deciding what the way we do things is around, we are deciding that, then you're making a statement about your identity. So what's your challenge to that?
Yeah, and of course we do not have to agree, but it's just wrong.
You gotta tell me how it's wrong.
Yeah, of course. The whole culture misunderstanding comes from the work. I think who popularized this misunderstanding was Ed Schein. Maybe we talked about this in an earlier episode. Not sure.
I don't know.
Ed Schein.
This would be a good episode to do. Right?
I think one of the mistakes, he passed away recently. Ed Schein, brilliant thinker, brilliant pioneer of organizational development. I think he just never understood systems theory, so he kept confusing culture and system. A system tells you what to do. Yeah, Deming there's
the system of profound knowledge kind of thing.
No. A system, an organizational system. In systems theory, we say the thing that the system produces is the system's purpose. For example, we say,
yeah.
So if it creates fraud, then the purpose of the system is fraud. Like take crypto, for example. It's crypto organizations, companies. They do not. It's not a mistake or an individual error. No. Crypto is a fraudulent scheme in a way. Yeah. So the system produces.
Mental note to go into that one later, but yes, okay.
Yeah. There's a lot to it. But what Ed Schein, great thinker again, but his major fault, I think, was to say things like, the culture is what the system. How is it? What is right?
The way we do things.
The way we do things here. Yes, which is wrong. Why is it wrong? Because the culture tells you, by seeing the culture of an organization, the culture tells you not what the way we do things. It tells you what's normal, and that's a very peculiar difference. The culture tells you what's normal.
Yeah, I don't understand that how that's distinct.
Good, very good. Then we can distinguish it. The culture tells you what's normal. So you might say, this is not our culture. That means it wouldn't be normal. Can you do it? That's another question. Yeah. The culture tells you what's normal. If you are acclimatized with an organization, with the culture, you will know what's normal and what's a deviation from normality. You can still do it. The culture doesn't tell you what to do. A system tells you what to do. It's very different.
Yeah.
So a system, your bonus system, for example, tells you what targets to make to get the money. That tells you what to do. You can still deviate from that and ignore it, but it has other consequences. By the way, culture, breaking cultural or acting against cultural normality might also have consequences, but that's a different matter.
But culture, well, I mean, and we are talking about the idea of moving from an alpha to a beta organization is a complete break with the norm. With that organizational norm.
You will have a different culture, but for that you need to change the system. You can only work the system, you can never work the culture. This is essential to the whole understanding of the thing. That's why Ed Schein, we should discuss this in a separate session maybe. Really, he cost us as a field dearly, because he contributed to this illusion that we can work things that we cannot work. We can work culture. That's what he suggests.
And that's pervasive. It's pervasive. We were the head of people and culture, right? So I am responsible for the organizational culture.
Yeah, I'm the culture officer.
How can that happen? What are you talking about? How can you take responsibility?
But of course, from observing the system, you can usually know a lot about the culture. For example, if a bank has a strong incentive and bonus system, you know that collaboration will be hard to achieve. It will be a non-collaborative culture. You know that.
Yeah, it'll be competitive.
People may still collaborate, but that's because they are crazy. Inside the system.
Boy, and this gets into the idea of competitiveness, incentives, and collaboration.
Yes. The distinction. So systems produce a culture. Change the system, then the culture will change. You do not know exactly how and when and what and why and in which speed and velocity and which patterns might form, but you know the general idea. You have a general idea when you change the system. That's why working the system is fast. Changing the culture is impossible.
Well, changing
when you work, the system, your culture will change. It cannot.
Exactly.
It's doggy.
It's not impossible. It's guaranteed. I think that's almost what you say. This again, this is a nod to.
This is not in the paper, by the way.
Not in the paper. This is not to Paul Tuchinski as well. I think in terms of socio-technical systems. I mean that we are talking about the changes in the system. We are talking about intervening in a socio-technical system within an organization. So that flipping the system. So again, I could go into the patterns that I'm interested in. What patterns? Okay, so the patterns that I'm interested in as well. I'm looking at them. Profit sharing and employee ownership, and so profit sharing.
This came up in a conversation of ours here in BetaCodex Live.
Yeah, and salary negotiations too. Or I think that's kind of no, it's not that because you're talking about profit sharing. You're also talking about individual compensation so profit sharing, employee ownership, and salary negotiation. So money.
Yeah, it's a big topic. That's why it comes up in every self-structure design work, in all beta transformation work, in all the salaries. I mean, we cover this in a way in the relative targets approach. That is also social technology. It's also published. But the relationship between those two social technologies that we published a couple of years ago, self-structure design and relative targets, both available online under open source licenses for everyone. They are inseparable. In fact, these two social technologies, one relative targets is more about performance systems, self-structure design more about organizational design and structure and power and decision-making. They interrelate. So you cannot bring about a self-structure design without touching upon relative targets topics. And one of the questions that always comes up is, how fair are salaries? Should we have profit sharing for everyone? And how should we change it during the transformation?
Yeah. Well, hey, if we're not going to have an HR department anymore, if we're not going to have HR partners that do that, well, how are we going to figure out who gets paid and how much, right? And Gesundheit, by the way.
Well, the real problem is not how do people get paid when we do not have HR. Usually, administration of how's it called? Monthly salary payments.
The wages, compensation, or
the compensation process is sometimes outsourced, or it doesn't change with beta transformation.
Payroll,
payroll, yes, payroll stuff in principle. How to administer payroll administration in principle doesn't change with beta transformation. However, the question usually comes up, and this is one of the patterns in the paper as well: who will negotiate salary raises?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, if my manager is not going to say, pat me on the head and say, good boy, you met all my targets, and now you get to climb the ladder, or go find the cheese in the maze, right?
Yes.
Well, if I don't have the manager doing that, how do I? How do I know I'm doing a good job, and B, how do I grow my income? Right.
Yes.
Am I growing in alpha? Right. You're growing your income by meeting targets to raise your level of authority, so you have charge of more people, and that. Yes. So once you get to level this, you get your bonuses, and you get your only the people at the top get the stock options or the profit sharing as part of their compensation. So so that's the alphabet. So
there's another thing that I often observe at clients during client work, and that is that, of course, some managers do not like the work of salary negotiations. They dislike it, actively dislike it. So sometimes I find this, that managers tell me, I want to get rid of that burden of salary negotiation. So how can we organize it? Do we put it all into HR? Usually that's not a good solution. Because HR people are usually totally the least.
They know less. They know less about the. So
exactly. They should do.
Why would they?
With exceptions, of course. In HR, you might have people with mastery to do it. This is the pattern. salary negotiations in the beta organization should be done by people who have the appropriate mastery, which may be managers or not. And that is a shift. We always have lengthy discussions about this topic when moving to a self-structure. It's always a thing that needs to be figured out by the client.
Who has mastery in salary negotiations?
That question is already part of the solution. Exactly.
Yeah.
Who has the mastery? Not because in a hierarchical organization, it's clear that your boss has to make this conversation, has to have this conversation with you. But if you want to make this link, hierarchical link,
right? Well, it's imposed. It is, if you don't do it, you are sanctioned for not doing it.
Exactly. And of course, it has to be done. I mean, everybody deserves a salary conversation every year or so, at least, right? So the question is, who should do it? How? What should be discussed? And how to organize it.
And the other thing, you say in the paper too about transparency makes this all natural. That if we are transparent about salary and we're negotiating salaries realistically, again based on profit and loss, so profit sharing, and again, if you have a socially dense cell, I would imagine those conversations are not always the easiest ones to have necessarily. In the beginning, when you're not used to having a transparent group, and there's this kind of, but you get practice in doing it, having good conversations and useful, valuable conversations that that you get rid of the bullshit. So.
Yes, and this comes along with the matter that in a cell structure, salaries tend to be much more transparent than in an alpha organization. So how to deal with that in parallel? That salaries become more transparent, profit and loss for every cell is transparent. The value created by any team is more transparent. So how do you deal with careers and salary adjustments, salary raises, also with setting the salary for new recruits?
There
are beautiful and simple and joyous solutions for that in beta, of course.
It creates disappointment, anger, harm, disengagement, attrition, all that kind of stuff. That if you are transparent and you're behaving like mature adults in the system, then you can and have enough trust with each other to have those conversations. I would be remiss if I didn't go into the pattern 5 of professional identities may be challenged when functionally integrated teams supplant functionally divided tribes.
Yes.
I read this to mean, what the fuck am I supposed to do now that I'm not really a hierarchical manager anymore? What is my identity? I identify I am a manager.
Yes, HR manager, marketing manager, quality manager, or an engineer, or
I'm the head of quality control, or I am the head, right?
But whatever. This also may challenge people who are not head of or manager of anything. So an engineer might say, "But we worked as engineers in my department, research and development or whatever, design." Mm-hmm. We had this department and we were all engineers, highly qualified with diplomas, and we were cool and independent and nobody could fuck with us. And now I should be part of a team that does value creation and where there are people that have not the same diploma, who are not engineers. Because functionally integrated teams mean to dissolve these families of likewise people.
Yeah.
And that is a serious matter. I think that is what sometimes people mistake with resistance to beta or resistance to self-structure. It's a natural reaction, a natural response to a self-structure, and it's a serious matter.
Well, it's a change in affiliation, right? It's a change in who am I? I'm no longer a member. Well, I am also a member of this other tribe. I am, because
I'm still part of the engineers tribe.
You don't lose the affiliation, right? Exactly. I mean, and this is I hesitate to even say it, but this is an idea that's hinted at by the folks that was hinted at that happened emergently at Spotify. That there of course it ended up as a matrix, but they talked about this kind of concept of you had guilds and tribes and chapters there was a holistic
guild is a group of people with the same profession. That's a guild.
Exactly. So but that again is it's a baseline assumption if a beta transformation is desired. If a sponsor really wants it, people's identities are going to change. Their working identities are going to change.
Yes, exactly.
And that's tough. And then I think we also said in the beta consulting episode, whether I don't know if
it can be tough for some, what the pattern says. It can be liberating for most, or will be liberating for most, and for some it will be a little bit tough to deal with, to figure it out what it means, and what it challenges and what it does not challenge.
Yeah. And this is where it comes to that as a consultant, as consultants, our job is to help the sponsor feel safe, right? There's that sense of safety. And we talked, maybe this is it's certainly a different topic, but that yes, people's identities are going to change, and you're going to be looked at as a sponsor to help people make sense of that.
Yes, we also as sponsors, we have to help as consultants. We have to help the sponsor figure out ways how to deal constructively with those conflicts that might arise from this kind of pattern. How to confront it, how to deal with it, how to intervene so that it can fade away, that it can dissolve, that it can find solution, closing.
Yes. We are as usual past our. We don't have a time limit. No, whenever it's over, it's over. It's open space, man.
By the way, we didn't even mention the two last patterns, which are about the process of adopting self-structure design. And in pattern number 9, we share some information that we never shared before in writing anywhere, except with slides, about the process of adopting a self-structure design. So it's, I think, very interesting. Pattern number 9.
Oh yeah. There, some people might that sequential. You kind of outline the emergence.
How does it work in 60 to 90 days or so? How does it work? And the practicality is described there. So I think this, especially for English speakers or speakers of other languages than German, it will be totally new for them. There were some hints, other versions of this in the self-structure design book in German, and it will be another version of that content will be in the self-structure design book in English, but not the same. This is peculiar.
This is for those of you out there reading the paper along with us. This is on page 14, the graphic on the bottom right of the page. That is the. Again, I did find that very interesting. Thank you for pointing that out and bringing it forward.
Yeah.
Interesting. And of course, the assumption is that the best way to do cell structure design is via open space beta engagement.
Yes, that's the most powerful one. But that's what the pattern number 10 I think is about. There is another light option for smaller organizations that it's interesting to explore that as well. It can be explored, and we have done it successfully. So it's tried and tested.
Yeah. What is the did you go into the numbers of what 120 people would be the limit for the light engagement? Is there a low? We've talked maybe a little bit about what is the lower limit for
self-structure design.
Yeah. What's the smallest? Kind of, because people may ask. I don't know.
What do you think?
I'd say about 50. It'd be my 50.
For open space beta, it's the lowest that I would recommend. Yes, when you have 50 people in the company, then you can start thinking about open space beta. Before that, I would use a light approach, definitely.
No.
Yes. 50, 60 people, that's where you can start contemplating open space beta. Before that, I wouldn't do it. I would do so between up to 120 people, the light approach is a good option, and open space beta can only, I think, really work when you have 50 people overall.
Yeah, well, because an open space event as it stands, just the way the structure of the event is with less than 50 people.
Yeah.
For those of you who have ever been in an open space event, you know what we're talking about here. That works better with that kind of density.
Yes.
Is there anything else about this paper in particular you would like to say before we close out with
I mean, we published it just a few days ago, so I would be happy to hear about what people think about the paper. Yeah, have they read it? What have they understood? What did they like about it? I would be happy to hear about that. Or we, Silke and I, we would be happy to hear people's thoughts about it. And as one of the founders of the BetaCodex network, I hope that we will, in the future, this year, maybe start producing more papers. Or other people will start producing papers or suggesting papers. Or collaborating in research and research papers. So that would be a wish for 2024.
Well, our next research gathering for the network is on March 4th at noon Eastern.
But so nobody has to wait. They can just jump in.
Nobody has to wait. But the March is do it now. So start with your idea. Talk to Niels. Talk to me. Talk to Silke, Peter. Any if you join the network on LinkedIn. Or if you go to the website, there are any number of resources that you can read and consume that will inspire you to explore more and to engage with the topics. That's how I ended up here and with the book and just got turned on to it. You want to learn more? If you follow your curiosity, go to betacodex.org and click on the hamburger. You'll be all around the website. So, have you ever heard it? You know what I'm talking about? The hamburger.
The hamburger? No.
Oh, the hamburger menu is the three dots, or the three lines, the stacked lines. At the top of every web page. You click on it. Here on the States, we call that the hamburger menu.
Okay, I never heard that before. It's witty. Yeah. But I think we don't have that on the computer, only on the website, or it's only when you use the phone.
No, it's on the website. It's on the website too.
Okay.
Either way, there's so much out there, and don't worry if you don't understand something, ask. And don't be afraid to assert something, and know that you may be challenged. Or we're all about being mature adults here, and
most of the time we can stand critical thinking, right?
If you're dabbling, and you're saying something that's bullshit or not founded, be expected to be challenged. And if you don't like to be challenged occasionally, then what the hell are you doing? And fuck off. Yeah. Okay, so hey, I think we're an hour in. YouTube's not gonna.
Yeah, the level is going down, right? The quality of the conversation is going down.
Yeah,
this was lovely, right? Thank you for this episode. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the research.
Well, thank you for writing the paper, and everyone out there is looking forward to the next one, as am I. And we all have the capability and capacity to write our own research papers and bring them forward, and you are invited to do so. Tune in next week for a topic that we are probably going to talk about and figure out what it is after we close the call. And as always, do what you're supposed to do on YouTube: like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, all that kind of stuff that we as YouTubers have to say. And beyond that, I thank you for the precious gift of your time and attention out there in Beta Land. And Niels, any final parting words before we put our lovely graphic on the screen?
See you next week.
All right.